All right, we're back to another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens, of course. Happy Wednesday, the day before Turkey Day. Hopefully everybody's setting up for a nice 4-day weekend. I cannot wait. So we're going to have lots of football, but today we are going to have lots of basketball. 14 games on the slate today. Lots to talk about, a lot of games. Let's go ahead and jump right into it so we don't waste a whole lot of time. Don't want to have an hour-long podcast, so I'm going to jump right into it. Nets at the Celtics, Boston minus 6.5 here at home, 228 on that total. Magic at the Cavs, Cleveland, minus 1.5. No total. A couple of these games don't have a total. As we know, there's obviously implications that we'll see, Kevin Love in this one for sure, that have not allowed a total. Jazz at the Pacers, Utah minus 1.5 here on the road. No total. We're waiting to see if Rudy Gobert is going to play, which would be a big pivotal part for this Jazz team, especially around the rim. Kings at the 76ers, Philadelphia minus 9.5, 208 on the total. Low total in this one. Pistons at the Hornets, Detroit minus 3.5 here on the road, 216 on that total. Knicks at the Raptors, Toronto minus 10.5 here at home, 209. Heat at the Rockets, we do not have a total, waiting to kind of see, Capella, that's right, Capella news. They're waiting on that one, I'm guessing, for that total. Houston minus 5.5 here at home against the Heat. Hawks at the Bucks, a nice little huge pace-up spot here. Or not pace up, but just a high pace, high flow, fast game. Milwaukee minus 14.5 here at home, 239 on that total. Nice game, obviously, to target. Clippers at the Grizzlies. Clippers on a back-to-back. They just played and pretty much beat up the Dallas Mavericks last night. So now they are going to Memphis to play the Grizzlies on a back-to-back. The Clippers are minus 6.5 here on the road. No total on this one. I'm going to guess that Kawhi is at least going to sit on the back-to-back. PG-13 may. I'm not really sure. That's going to be something interesting. We're going to have to monitor that status. Next game on the board is T-Wolves at the Spurs. San Antonio minus 1.5 here at home. 228 on that total. Decently high one. The Spurs have been in some decently high total games here lately. They're just not playing a whole ton of defense, but also the fact that the T-Wolves run with lots of pace. They're right inside like the top 7 in terms of pace on the season. So, of course, that one's going to be a game we're going to want to target as well. The Wizards at the Suns. Phoenix minus 8.5. We get the Wizards here on a back-to-back. They just played in Denver last night. They actually got ran. They actually played almost all 4 quarters. I think they got right around to like the 5 or 6 minute mark, and they were down about 10-ish to 15, and they kind of kept it and hung around. I think they ended up losing by 15 or 18. Denver's really good, but nonetheless, Brad Beal played only like 29 minutes, I think, so 30 minutes. So most of their starters didn't play a full load of minutes. So, but you got to think, they played in altitude in Denver. Now they're going to the desert to play the Suns. Minus 8.5, probably fair enough. 242 on that total. It's a huge one. That's the biggest total on the slate by far, by at least 12 or more points. So obviously that's going to be a game we're going to be looking to target. The Lakers at the Pelicans. Anthony Davis has this game circled on his calendar from the start of the season. His return to New Orleans. Lakers minus 6.5, 230 on that total. Obviously another game that's going to be a decently high total, high pace with the Pelicans at home. You have a bunch of revenge plays in this game. Of course, it's Anthony Davis. You have Lonzo Ball. You have Brandon Ingram. You have Josh Hart. I don't know if Josh Hart's even playing, but nonetheless, you get the picture. Thunder at the Blazers. Portland minus 3.5, 220 on that total. So that one's a decently high total that I don't think a lot of that will garner a lot of ownership. I like a couple plays out of this one per se, so this one will be one I'll be looking at. And then finally, your late night hammer with the Bulls at the Warriors. Chicago minus 2.5 on the road against this Warriors team. Don't know if Draymond's going to play, so we don't have a total. But okay. So that's kind of a rundown of the games. A few good ones that we would definitely look to target. A few that we might just want to scratch off and say, hey, I'm not even playing anything in this game. But, again, let's jump right into the positionals, get right into it. Point guard, LeBron James, 11.5. New Orleans, New Orleans is allowing the 10th most fantasy points over the last 5 to that point guard spot, 55 or more in his last 5 of 6. yeah, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a high-paced game. You put in LeBron in a pace-up spot against a team that doesn't exactly guard the point guard small forward position really well. So LBJ is absolutely going to be in play here. Russell Westbrook at 8.8. It's hard to keep playing Russ, but his price is just screaming, play me. This is against the Heat. I do think that Butler will probably be on Harden. He only put up like 22.8 fantasy points in this game prior, and that was, I believe, in Miami. So this time he gets him at home. He's put up 44, 69, and 38 in his last 3 at home. So this is going to be a fast-paced game. Miami has actually dropped to the mid-pack as far as pace goes, but we know Houston's still up there in the top 5. So this is going to be a pace-up spot for the Heat. And I think this is a decent spot for Russ. So I'm totally fine there. But one that I really like, of course, is Damian Lillard at 8.6. He's going to get CP3 defense, which has been averaging right around a 110 defensive rating over his last 5. We've been attacking that OKC point guard spot for a while now. I'm pretty sure that Dame returning back at home under 9K here with 8.6 price tag. His first game back at home, and he's had a 27.6% usage rate over his last 2 since returning. He was off a couple games. They were on a big road stand. And, his first 2 games back, he played on the road. He shot like shit. And now he's getting to return back at home, where he usually does really well. So I like the price tag on Dame. I think he'll go under the radar with all these guys up at top here. LBJ, Harden, of course, on DraftKings is point guard eligible. So you're going to get a lot of ownership up in that top range, and I don't think a whole lot of people drop down to Dame. But it's a great spot here at home, and like I said, I think that's a sneaky game. That Thunder Blazers with a 220 total. And it's pretty close. Portland minus 3.5 here at home. So it's a close game, decently high total. I like this game a lot. So Dame is in play. Ben Simmons at 7.6. I think he's just too cheap. 45, 31, 50, 52 in his last 4. So he's went for over 50 in 2 of his last 4 and over 45 in 3 of his last 4. Gets a Sacramento team here that's not very good on defense. He's at home. I think most of the Sixers are in play today. Embiid, Simmons, Horford's not a bad look. Even Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson. Literally any one of their starting 5s will be in play. But Simmons at 7.6, like I said, we know he has 50-point upside. He's shown it in 2 of his last 4 games, 45 or more in his last 3 or 4 of 4. So, he's crushing value at this price. And like I said, he gets a decently nice spot here against Sacramento at home. One play that I really like, and hopefully he does play tonight, and that is Ja Morant. Of course, the Clippers are going to be traveling, like I said, on a back-to-back after playing in Dallas last night, coming to Memphis. Ja Morant has actually played really well lately. To get 30 or more minutes in his last 5 of 6, over 44 in his last 4 of 6, and Memphis is, the Clippers are allowing the first – no, I'm sorry, what was that? They're allowing the – yeah, they were last night. They were allowing the most fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last 5, but now they are 5th. So they're allowing a lot of points to the point guard spot. I'm thinking Patrick Bev could potentially be on Ja Morant, but I'm just not really too awfully worried about it. His minutes are up. He's seeing really nice usage, right around 30, over 30%, right around 31% usage rate at home. He's been playing really well, and he's 7K. Getting the Clippers on a back-to-back, I'm totally fine with Ja Morant. If he does indeed play, I think he's got back soreness or something that he's dealing with. So that'll be a status to monitor. Obviously, if he doesn't play, Tyus Jones at 3.2K becomes a pretty solid punt. It'll be more of a value play considering the fact that he should see over 30-plus minutes. They might recall DeAnthony Melton, who's been playing decent minutes, and the fact when Ja Morant doesn't play. So that'll be interesting to note as well. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Malcolm Brogdon at 6.8K. He's still really cheap. He was 6K last game. Put up 35 fantasy points in 30 minutes. Gets a Utah team that, they're not as good defensively as they have been. They still are a team that I don't exactly love to fade, but Malcolm Brogdon is a do-it-all point guard. And, he gets a nice home tilt here with Utah. And like I said, he played 30 minutes in his return. So I'm totally fine with Malcolm Brogdon. Kemba Walker at 6.7. We don't know if he's playing or not yet, but he looks like to be probable, which would be great because he's only 6.7 here at home against the Nets. The The Nets have been a little bit better defensively with Spencer Dinwiddie at the point guard spot, but they're still not great. So if he definitely plays and he's not on a minutes limit at 6.7, he could absolutely be a slate breaker. Of course, he's put up 46 and 52 fantasy points in his last two at home, or he's averaging 47 fantasy points at home so far on the season in his last four, I believe. He gets a nice pace up spot here with the Nets. As I mentioned, the Nets like to run with pace. They are in the top 10. Kemba, if he does play and he does have full minutes, I think at 6.7, he's just way too cheap, mispriced there. Kyle Bowman at 6.4 if Draymond is out again, 41.5, 43.8 in his last two, and he's played over 32 minutes in his last three. If Draymond sits again, he gets a great matchup here with the Bulls. He should start. He should see over 30 minutes, and we will definitely be looking at him at 6.4. Dennis Schroeder at 5.7. Again, staying in the OKC Portland game, I like it. He's only 5.7. Portland allowing the sixth most fantasy points to the point guard spot over their last five. He's put up over 30 fantasy points in his last two on the road, and he has and is carrying the highest usage rate on the team at 27.5%, both at home and road. Schroeder is a usage monster whenever he gets on that, on the court in that second unit. This is going to be a great spot here for him in Portland. As we've talked about, Portland is not very good against the point guard or the shooting guard spot. So this one is a nice tournament play in Dennis Schroeder. Dejounte Murray at 5.4. His minutes limit has got to be lifted soon. I mean, he's been actually seeing less minutes since the earlier part of the season. It's kind of weird. I don't know what's going on over there. But he sat out Saturday. He only played, 21 minutes. He's literally not played over 25 in his last five. Hasn't played over 25, obviously, all year. But the thing is Minnesota is allowing the number one fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last five. So, of course, if we don't hear any news on him, it's going to be hard to play. But in tournaments, I think this is an absolutely fine play. It's a higher total here, again, 228 with the T-Wolves and Spurs. Dejounte Murray at home. We've been fading Jeff Teague for a long time. We will continue to do so. We just would really like him to see 28 or more minutes. If for some reason his minutes cap is lifted, I will definitely be on Dejounte Murray. Rajon Rondo at 5K, 24 more minutes in his last 4 or 5, 24 plus fantasy points in his last 4 or 5, 30 and 33.3 in his last two. Has a smidge over 21% at 21.9% usage in his last five. And, of course, we are playing against the Pelicans here. So Rondo will definitely be in play at 5K. On the flip side, Lonzo Ball at 4.9. We get Rondo D, who doesn't play a lot of defense. 25 or more minutes is all that he's been getting. He hasn't been getting over. He's played 25 minutes, and then he played 21 in the back-to-back. Hopefully, we see a little bit of a minutes bump here. He should get a minutes bump, considering he's been back 2 games now, played 25 and 21 minutes, put up 23 and 27 fantasy points in those last two. So, at 4.9, if Lonzo Ball gets a bump against this Lakers team in the revenge spot, I'm totally there for that one. A couple, one I missed was Dinwiddie at 7.8 against Boston. Boston has been giving up some decent amounts of points to point guard spots, even with Kemba. So, of course, we know there's going to be no Kyrie. I think you got to play Dinwiddie again. He's still just too cheap at 7.8. He's going to be a nice pace-up spot here, and I'm totally fine with that. Ricky Rubio at 5.5 was another one I missed. Don't know if he's going to be fully back or not. We'll need to have some kind of clarification. But we do get Washington on a back-to-back here. Highest total on the board. He's 5.5K. He's put up over 30 fantasy points in every single home game so far this year. I just got to know if he's going to be a full go or not. If he's a full go, he could easily break the slate at 5.5K against Washington. So that's one to keep in your back pocket. And TJ McConnell at 4.5 is a punt that I like. 26 or more in his last 4 of 6, 22-plus minutes in his last 4 of 6. He's been playing decent minutes in relief of Malcolm Brogdon, of course, and he will now see more, obviously. Of course, Brogdon hasn't played over 30 minutes since his return. He's only played 1 game. So, but anyway, he's been playing really well, been putting up decent numbers for his price. So keep that one there. Shooting guard, James Harden at 11.8. We got a nice pace-up spot here, of course, in Houston. against the Heat. 62, 56, 71, 72 in his last 4 at home. Don't really have to extend on Harden too much. We know he's a great play. Brad Beal, I think, is interesting at 9.6. He's a little bit expensive, but it's simple fact that he only played 30 minutes last night. He didn't play a whole lot of minutes. And his last 3 on the road have resulted in 57, 68.3, and 63. So Brad Beal on the road against Phoenix, I think a lot of people shy away from it because, you got a decently high spread here. The Suns almost 9-point favorites at home, but the total is just massive. And, you kind of just have to look for those elite plays that nobody will probably likely be on. I think a lot of people will go up to Harden here in that spot. So I think Bill is a decent pivot here. I think people will probably play Booker, knowing that Washington's on a back-to-back. But, again, Bill has been playing really well. Like I said, over 57 in his last 3 on the road. Of course, prior to that Denver game last night where they they were beat all game. They never had a lead. They were down by 10 to 15 most of the game. So, totally fine with Bill there. If you want to pay up for him, I think it's a decent spot. Booker at 8.5, Washington, 9th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5, 51 and 65 in his last 2 of 4. Of course, same essence here. Gets the Wizards on a back-to-back here after they just played in Denver. And if Ricky Rubio has any kind of limits restriction, we'll get Point Booker again, and that's good news for everybody. So Devin Booker at 8.5, totally fine with. Drew Holiday at 8.1, over 43 in his last 4 of 5. The Lakers, of course, still don't have Avery Bradley. He will likely play a lot of the point guard and shooting guard spot with Lonzo off the floor, play point guard. He's averaging 50.5 fantasy points over his last 4 at home. Pace-up spot. The Lakers, of course, playing a lot of Rondo at the point guard spot with Drew Holiday, I think can exploit that matchup quite well. So, totally fine with Drew Holiday at 8.1. Jimmy Butler at 8K. We get a nice pace-up spot here, of course, with Houston D as well. Over 46 in his last 3 of 5. So, Jimmy Butler, I believe, is definitely in play here against Houston, who we know doesn't defend very well. I'm fine with him getting Russ, Harden, anybody they want to throw on him. Daniel House, if they feel like he can match up. But, Butler, I'm totally fine with. Fred VanVleet at 7.9. The guy's playing tons and tons of minutes. 44, 38, 38 in his last 3 at home. Over 38 or more in his last 6. So, Fred VanVleet here at home is a spot that I'm totally fine with. Andrew Wiggins at 7.7, 35 or more in his last 8, over 42 in his last 4 of 7, and you got a high total here at 228 with the Spurs. So Andrew Wiggins at 7.7, yeah, I like it. I'm a fan. C.J. McCollum at 7.6, 16 or more field goal attempts in every single game. They just come fresh off a 6-game road trip, as I mentioned. They're returning back home. I like both him and Dame in this game. It's just one of them spots that I think returning back home, they'll be amped up, ready to get a nice win. Over 41 in his last 5 of 6. Gets a decent spot here with OKC. So C.J. McCollum at 7.6. Really would rather him down more like in the 7K range, but I still think he's fine at that price. Zach LaVine at 7.1. His price went down. He was my roster monster last time out that I did a pod, I guess it was 2 days ago, and he only put up 30 fantasy points in a massively great spot. So kind of let me down a little bit, but of course tonight playing Golden State, 3rd most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5. Did just put up 60 against Charlotte on the road 2 games ago. So LaVine, it is what it is. If you want to play him, I'm fine with it. If you don't, I'm fine with that as well. I might likely have a little bit just because of his price. Lou Williams at 6'9" is one that I believe will obviously have a lot of ownership or a lot of usage if Kawhi sits. It's going to be between him and PG, of course. Harrell gets a bump. He gets a bump. If Kawhi sits, he had over 30% usage whenever Kawhi was sitting, but that was with without PG. Over 35 or more in his last 3 or 4. Memphis, nice pace-up spot here. So, Lou Williams, I will totally be on if in the event that Kawhi and maybe PG sits. We'll see. Josh Richardson has been playing really well, 6.4, 36 or more in his last 4 or 5, 38, 44, 16 in a bad game, and then 36 and 36. So, like I said, been putting up really good numbers. Sacramento allowing the 8th most fantasy points to that shooting guard spot over the last 5. So Josh Richardson at 6.4 is a play that I really like as well. Evan Fournier at 6.4 has been gaining all the usage without Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. Cleveland allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5. We've been fading that spot forever. Over 34 in his last 5 of 7, 34 fantasy points, 25.1% usage in his last 7, 27.6% usage in his last 4. So yeah, I'm a fan of Evan Fournier at 6.4. Alec Burks at 6.1 versus Chicago, over 40 in his last 2 of 4. If Draymond sits again, I think this is a great spot where Burks can take advantage of a decently weak backcourt for the Bulls. It's at home. Like I said, if Draymond's out, there's going to be a lot of value on the Golden State team against this Bulls squad. So that one's one to look for. Luke Kennard, I think, is interesting at 5.8. The guy's played over 30. He's played over like 35 minutes in like almost every game. Over 31 in all but 1. So, he's playing lots of minutes. He just fresh off a 40.5-point game, put up 33.5 and 40.5 in his last 2. So, Luke Kennard gets a decent matchup here tonight. So, I'm totally fine with him against the Hornets again. So, they are allowing decent amounts to the shooting guard spot. So, Luke Kennard's one you can look at. Jordan Clarkson at 5.4, 23.2 usage in his last 2 games. 33 and 44 fantasy points in his last 2. Orlando is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over their last 5 games. So, Jordan Clarkson is a nice tournament play. Rolling along at the small forward spot, Brandon Ingram, spot that I really, really like. Obviously, we get a big revenge spot here, 29.8% usage in his last 3, over 42 fantasy points in his last 5. This is going to be a spot where Ingram is going to want to ball out, okay? The Lakers basically traded him off for Anthony Davis. He's going to want to show them what's up, This is going to be a massive spot for Brandon Ingram right here. I love the pivot here from, like a PG, because a lot of people are going to – if Kawhi's out, PG is going to garner a lot of ownership, and I'm totally fine with that because I want Brandon Ingram at 8.3. So, that being said, I will be on Brandon Ingram. DDR at 7.4 versus Minnesota, 38 or more in his last 5. Over 42 in his last 3 of 5. We get a nice pace-up spot here with the T-Wolves here at home. So, like I said, I kind of like that mixture or, I guess, matchup with Wiggins or whoever they throw on him, but I'm totally fine with DDR at home. Jaylen Brown at 6.9. We get a Nets defense here with a nice pace. Over 32 fantasy points in his last 6 of 7 games. They are back at home, so totally fine with Jaylen Brown. Kelly Oubre at 6.9. Of course, we get this game here with Washington at home. Highest total on the board. Washington allowing the 5th most fantasy points to that shooting or small forward spot over the last 5. Over 39 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3 at home. So Oubre is pretty appealing at 6.9 there in that matchup. Kevin Middleton, Chris Middleton. I don't really know why I said Kevin. Either way, Kevin or Chris, whoever the fuck he is, we're gonna be looking at Middleton if he's playing a whole allotment of minutes. I don't think that he will, but Atlanta has been just bleeding points to the small forward spot. They're number 1 over their last 5, second most on the season. They're just getting trashed by shooting or small forwards on the season so far. So Chris Middleton at 6.8 is not the price that I want. Especially with him returning from I don't know how many games he missed, probably five or so games. He might miss 5 or 6. So Middleton is interesting. I just got to have to see how many minutes he's going to get, obviously. Marcus Morris at 6.6, over 30 minutes per every game, basically. Toronto is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the small forward spot over the last 5. He's put up over 32 fantasy points in his last 4. Nobody plays Marcus Morris. Nobody ever plays Marcus Morris. But the guy is like tough as nails, plays tons of minutes. He's like an Iron Man. I'm fine with Marcus Morris at 6.6. Glenn Robinson, 3 here at 6K. Chicago versus a small forward spot has been an Achilles heel for him lately, ever since Otto Porter went out. So GR3, fresh off of 42-point games, put up 32 and 42 in his last 2. Draymond sits again. I mean, he's pretty decent look here at 6K. TJ Warren, I had to put in here just for the simple fact that Utah is allowing the number one most fantasy points to the small forward spot over their last 5 games. If Rudy comes back, this probably goes away because I don't really want TJ Warren driving the lane against Rudy. But if Rudy is not in there, I like TJ Warren quite a bit at 5'6". I think he's a great tournament play, over 28 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. Again, Utah number one most to the small forward spot over the last 5. Simply because they're having to play a lot of smaller guys down there on the blocks. Tony Bradley gets into foul trouble easily. He's only played 1 game, played a little bit of relief in another game or 2. He's a decent spot, but I like TJ Warren here at 5.6 in the event that Rudy Gobert sits again. DeAndre Hunter at 5.2 against Milwaukee, over 34 minutes in his last 4 or 5, over 29 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. He's probable. I think he had a Q tag, but pretty sure he's probable to go. I think he's good to go. That one's interesting. So DeAndre Hunter at 5.2, and then OG Anunoby at 4.8, 35 or more minutes, 30. He has 30-plus fantasy point upside. We've seen him put up 40 and close to 50 fantasy points in games so far. Gets the Knicks at home. He's cheap. We know he's going to play 35-plus minutes, so OG is there. Power forward, Giannis at 12.4. I think he's really interesting, and he's the highest price on the slate, and that's probably because he's went over 80 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3. He absolutely demolished the Utah team by himself. Of course, like I said, Rudy Gobert was out, which made that a little bit easier on him. He was a massive pivot for me the other night. I pivoted from Karl-Anthony Towns over to him. He put up like 90 fantasy points. I mean, the guy just rolled. Put up 50 real. So put up 83.5. Sorry. I exaggerated a little bit. But, nonetheless, over 80 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3 is pretty massive. Tonight, of course, he gets the Hawks at home. They are a 15-point favorite. But they are allowing the number 2 most fantasy points to that small power forward spot. Of course, on a 14-game slate, I don't believe a lot of people are going to pay up 12.4, almost 12.5K here for Giannis. But I think he's a great tournament play. Obviously, it's going to be hard to fit him in cash and try to make a cash lineup that you feel comfy with him in there being that high priced. But I think with as much value as you can probably find on this slate, you can probably play Giannis in tournaments. AD, of course, like I said, had this game circled on his calendar. New Orleans is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points over the last 5 to the power forward spot, over 53 in his last 3 or 4. Yeah, AD is going to be in play. Siakam at 8.9, over 43 in his last 3 at home, 35-plus minutes in his last 10. He's higher priced. He's almost 9K. But, he gets New York here at home. And he's been, like I said, he's been everything and all for the Raptors here. He's going to have to continue to be. He's hard to fit and he's hard to play, but the guy's been scoring over 45, basically 43-plus in all of his last 3 home games. He's had some 50-pointers here recently, so if you want to play him, I'm totally fine. Of course, PG-13 at 8.6 will become uber, chalk if Kawhi sits. You get him against Memphis here in a nice fast-paced up match. 37 or more percent is what he was garnering without Kawhi there in that one game. The second game he came back, I believe he had a 37% usage rate. So PG-13 at 8.6 is cheap. Sabonis is probably one of my favorite plays on this slate, and it will be massively more of a favorite for me if Gobert happens to sit. Sabonis could absolutely eat at 7.9, over 38 in all but one game, over 40 fantasy points in his last 4 of 6 on the road. If, Gobert happens to sit again, it's going to be a total smash spot here for Sabonis. Jason Tatum back at home, Brooklyn's second most fantasy points to the power forward spot over the last 5. He is averaging right around 31 fantasy points at home this year so far. He's basically topped 30 fantasy points in every single home game except one. So he's been really good at home. 31 in his last game and their first home game back from their road stand. He is a little bit pricey at 7.3, but I think I'm totally fine with it. Blake Griffin, please stop being 7K. I'm really tired of playing you at 7K and you doing nothing. But, of course, we have to talk about Blake Griffin because he is 7K, and he gets a nice matchup here with Charlotte, who's allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the power forward spot over the last 5. He has put up over 34 more in his last 3 or 4 or 5. Tournament. Tobias Harris, again, at 6.5, over 36 in his last 2 or 3 at home, over 30 in his last 6 of 7. Decent spot here, of course, again, with Sacramento. Totally fine with that. Eric Paschal at 6.3. We know Chicago is not good against the power forward spot. They're not good against bigs. He's played 28 or more minutes in his last, or 28 or more in his last 5. Over 30 fantasy points in his last 3 or 5. So, sorry, that's over 28 fantasy points in his last 5, over 30 in his last 3 of 5. So Paschal's been good. His price is fair. Gets the Bulls at home. If Draymond's out, I'm more of a fan because I think he'll play 40-plus minutes, and he'll see a lot more usage, of course. So moving on, Larry Nance at 6.3. Still too cheap here. If Kevin Love sits once again, you're going to have to play Nance again at 6.3. Over 30 in his last 4 or 5. Over 33 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. And Orlando is allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the power forward spot over their last 5 without Aaron Gordon. So Nance will absolutely be in play again. Danilo Gallinari is interesting at 6.2. Portland allowing the 10th most fantasy points to that power forward spot in their last 5. Over 34 in his last 2 on the road. Over 34 fantasy points in his last 3. Gallinari is pretty interesting. Again, I said I like that game. I think he's sneaky. I don't think anybody plays him. And he's only 6.2, so he's been topping his value. And if he gets 35-plus, it's all profit from there. So Gallinari's interesting. Of course, Carmelo in that same game at 5'9". OKC is also allowing the 9th most fantasy points to that power forward spot over their last 5. 41 or more. He just put up 41 fantasy points last game. So Carmelo, of course. Jaren Jackson Jr. at 5.8. 36.3 and 38.3 in his last 2. Clippers on him back-to-back here. We already know the Clippers struggle against bigs. Jaren Jackson has been playing really well lately in decently low minutes. He only played 22 minutes last game, but played 30-plus in the last 4 before that. So Jaren Jackson, I think, is totally fine here at home against the Clippers on a back-to-back. Dario Saric at 5.4. He's been up and down this year, but the simple fact that he put up 47.6 in his last game against Denver shows that he does have immense upside. We know he does. He does a little bit of everything. He can shoot the 3 really well. Of course, if he's shooting the 3 really well and he's grabbing rebounds, which I think he could here, of course, against the Washington Wizards, who are very bad, and allowing lots of points to the power forward spot, I'm totally fine with Dario Saric at 5.4. Moving to the center spot, Karl Anthony Towns at 10.3. I don't really have to talk about that one too much. We know he's going to be in play against San Antonio. Drummond versus Charlotte is a total smash spot. Charlotte's allowing 3rd most fantasy points to the center spot over their last 5, 38 or more in his last 3 at home. So Drummond has been really good. It's one of the best spots he could have. Joel Embiid at 9.1 is a total bounce back spot, and of course he gets a Sacramento team at home that is not exactly very big. They have Rashawn Holmes as their starting center. And if he gets in foul trouble, they're going to have to put in Dwayne Dedmon. So this is a great spot for Joel Embiid. Clint Capella at 8.2 is questionable. We'll have to see if he's for sure going to play. But at 8.2, he's grabbed over 19 rebounds in his last 7, put up over 40 fantasy points in his last 7. Clint Capella has been an absolute beast lately. So if he does play against Miami here at home in a nice pace-up spot, I'm a fan. Wendell Carter Jr. at 6.9 is interesting. 27.8, 44.3, and 37.3 in his last 3 or 4. We know Golden State struggles a little bit against the center spot. They're actually allowing like the 2nd or 3rd most fantasy points to the center spot over the whole season. So Wendell Carter Jr. is really interesting at 6.9. Another one, of course, going back to that Portland and OKC game, Hassan Whiteside at 6.6 I think is one of my more favorite values. Played 23 minutes in his return, 36 fantasy points, and OKC is allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to that center spot over the last 5. I was looking, and Steven Adams has like a 113 defensive rating over his last 5. Not really good. The guy's, getting older, and Hassan could easily manhandle this game. So Hassan, I'm a fan at home here at 6.6. Tristan Thompson at 6.5. Orlando, 6th most fantasy points to the center spot over their last 5. He's put up 35 or more in his last 2 or 3 at home. So Tristan Thompson, of course, I'm totally fine with. One that I also really, really like, going back to the Clippers against Bigs, of course, is Valanciunas at 6.2 here. Love the price, love the spot. Clippers on a back-to-back. They struggle against Bigs. He just put up 35 fantasy points in 26 minutes, and we've seen him touch 30 minutes. So this game stays relatively close, which I think it will, even without Kawhi. I think Val could easily play 28 to 30 minutes, and this is just an excellent spot and a total smash spot for him because the Clippers suck against Bigs. So Jonas Valanciunas is one of my more favorite plays down here in the 6K range. Brook Lopez at 5.9 versus Atlanta hit the radar. And then, of course, Cantor at 5K versus the Nets. We fade the Nets. They could be with DeAndre Jordan, without DeAndre Jordan once again. So if you want to play Jarrett Allen at 6.7 or 7.6K, yeah, that's right. Jarrett Allen at 7.6K. I just can't see myself doing that. He has to have 40-plus to make value. He has been playing really well, but I'm not playing him tonight. Like I said, I like some cheaper plays there. But it's there. And, of course, Cantor, like I said, if Daniel Tice is questionable. Actually, he's already been ruled out. So Daniel Tice is out. Cantor will probably likely start again. And he played 22 minutes, I think, or so, 22 or 26, something like that. And he put up a decent amount of fantasy points, 26 fantasy points. So he played 22 and 26, got 26 fantasy points. Either way, Cantor at 5K. Obviously against the Nets, a team that we've faded Bigs all season, not going to stop now. Anyway, 36 minutes on this pod, 14 games. I think I did really well. I know there's going to be a lot to talk about today. There's a lot of news coming out, a lot of totals that we don't have, a lot of players we're going to have to see for minutes restrictions that are returning, Alonzo Ball, Chris Middleton. Like I said, a lot of things that we're going to have to watch, Dejounte Murray. So I will be in and out of chats all day. I'll be talking with you guys about the slate, and we will obviously see who we're playing tonight. So you guys have a wonderful Wednesday. Start to your, I guess this will be your last work day, hopefully for most of you. So enjoy it. We'll talk about this slate later.